Welcome back to the Kickstarter Weekly, everyone. This week's episode, we'll be looking at crowdfunding games completing their funding between December the 12th and December the 18th. Before each section that I talk about in this video, I'll talk a little bit about that section. As always, my videos are bookmarked, tabbed, so you can just mouse over the various categories and look for a specific category or a specific game that you want to hear about if you're not interested in watching the whole video. Please remember to like and subscribe. That's the best way to support the channel at this point in time. And also, I'm particularly interested in your comments about the last two sections, the games that I personally backed from last week, and the games that have arrived into my collection. And I'll talk about why in those sections. So let's get started. Let's kick things off with the games that I've played since the last video. So I've changed how I'm handling this section. I'm now going to tell you when it's the first time that I'm talking about a game in this section. So if it's something that I've talked about before, I won't say that it's the first time I'm talking about it, and I may talk about the game much more briefly. So if you want to hear more talk about that particular game, you'll know that you can go back to previous videos, and at some point I'll be talking about it in much more length. But for the first time that I'm talking about a video, you will know, and I'll talk about it more than I normally would. The first game that I'm talking about today is a game called Seven Wonders. I was talking about Seven Wonders Duel last video, and that's sort of a two-player version of Seven Wonders. Seven Wonders is a game that can only be played with 3 or more players. And there was a time where it was a hugely popular board game, maybe 10 years ago or so, when there weren't as many board games out there. And this is a game I think that players gravitated towards because you can play it up to, I think, 7 players. So it's a fairly good game to teach easily to a large group of people and have everyone playing simultaneously. Now, I've played it a few times in the past. I played it on Board Game Arena recently. I think I was wanting to revisit it just because I've been talking about Seven Wonders Duel. And my plays, I can't remember how many times I played it. It may only be once. My play reconfirmed for me that I think Seven Wonders Duel is the better game and the better experience. There's a lot of card drafting games that have come out since Seven Wonders, and I just find that I don't love Seven Wonders. You're getting a number of cards at the start of the game. I think it's 7, and you'll select one card every turn and then pass your hand to the left. You'll get, the new incoming hand from your right, and you'll do the same thing. You'll pick one of those cards. When you get down to the last card, it'll get discarded. So, you'll get 2 cards. You'll pick one, and the last one will get discarded, and that will be the end of a round, or the end of an age. And you play over 3 ages. Each age switches directions. So if you're moving to the left during one age, the next age will move to the right. And you're just trying to collect cards that will score you points. Sometimes that means resource cards that will help you to eventually build the wonders on your particular player board. Sometimes that means trying to collect sets of science cards. Sometimes that means getting a lot of military, because at the end of every age, there'll be a contest with military, and depending on who has higher military, you and your neighbors, so you're only playing this part against your 2 neighbors, you'll either get a token of value, which goes up with each age. So in the first age, it's 1 point, second age, it's 3, third age, it's 5. And if you have fewer military signs than if you have fewer military icons than your neighbor, you'll lose that battle and you'll get a negative 1 point marker. So there's the science, there's the military, there's the way certain cards can chain into later cards in the game, allowing you a free build. There's building for resources, as I mentioned, that'll help you construct your wonder. But once you have resources, you can use those resources to build other cards, and sometimes your neighbors will be able to buy your resources and they'll pay you money. And money is always a good thing to have. You never want to get into a position where you don't have enough money to build a card that you really need as it comes by. If you're ever sort of out of money, you can always use that turn to discard a card for 3 coins. But it's bad news when that happens on a turn where there is a card that you'd really like to build and you just don't have the money to build it. So, there's some interesting choices here in this game, but a lot of it feels haphazard to me, and it just doesn't feel like a compelling play to me. So I like to play it sometimes. I think it's a fairly good game on Board Game Arena. It's a good game to play if you have a lot of people and you want something that can play fairly, easily, fairly quickly, and keep everyone engaged. It's not a hard teach. So it kind of hits a lot of those check marks. I wouldn't call it a party game, but you can almost play it as a party game if you're playing with a larger group of people who maybe don't want to play party games. I myself am not a huge fan of party games. So it does offer you a little more strategy than those types of games, but there is some randomization in the cards that are coming through. You don't always know what's going to go by. You don't always know, when you should be spending your last money to construct something you really want or cashing out a card for something that's coming to you in the future, because you don't necessarily know what's coming to you in the future. So the game does feel a little random to me, and I don't love it, but I have a good time playing it once in a while. I don't think I've ever actually played my physical copy, so one of the reasons that I was playing it on Board Game Arena was to try to decide if I should even keep my physical copy or just let it go. And I think I'll probably let it go. In the time since Seven Wonders came out, there have just been so many other games that have built off of Seven Wonders, card drafting games that are really good. Last week I talked about the Isle of Cats. That combines card drafting with tile placement, and that game to me is just an evergreen. It's a gem. And so I would much rather play that than Seven Wonders, although admittedly there's a lot more going on in that game. It's not going to play as quickly as Seven Wonders. You've got the tile placement element. It's a longer game. There's a lot more strategy, a lot more stuff. But I still much prefer the Isle of Cats to Seven Wonders. And if I was looking for a card drafting experience that I enjoy, I'd go for Isle of Cats over this one. So for me, Seven Wonders is going to come in with a 6.5. It's a high enough score to indicate that I enjoy playing it when it comes around, but it's not something I think I'll be keeping in my collection, and it's not a game that I would seek out to play, other than maybe occasionally on Board Game Arena, and occasionally I'll enter like a tournament there just for fun, just to see how far I can get. But it's a solid little game. It's sort of a cornerstone of the hobby in a lot of ways. I think there was a period of time where it appealed to a lot of gamers and got a lot of play. Definitely earned its place. But there are other better games out there depending on what you like. And for me, there are definitely things I would rather play. I haven't yet gotten a chance to play It's a Wonderful World or It's a Wonderful Kingdom. I'm really jazzed about those games. I think there's some card drafting in there, also some resource production. So I don't know, there's just a lot of other things to choose from at this point in time that have kind of built off of the mechanical groundwork laid by Seven Wonders. But it's earned its place, and some people still really like it, so it gets a 6.5 for me. And again, if I didn't say it already, this is the first time that I'm talking about it. So if I talk about it again in the future, it won't be in so much detail. It'll just be to amend my score. I also played the Castles of Burgundy, and this is a game that I haven't played in a while. I haven't played since pre-pandemic. I played it online with a friend of mine on Board Game Arena, and I was reminded how much I love this game and how good this game is. One thing I think that really makes the game great in some ways is the ease of teach. You are just rolling 2 dice every round, and then you're using those 2 dice to take turns, and there's different ways you can use the dice. You can place them in certain areas to draft a tile from that area. You'll put it on your player board in sort of a bank. You can also use it to place a tile that's already on your board into a space on your player board if the numbers match. There are goods that you can get. Sometimes if you place a ship tile, you'll be able to get some goods off of the board. You can sell some of those goods to get something called silverlings, which are these coins. You'll be able to use those coins to buy additional tiles from the middle of the board, tiles that you can't get any other way. You'll also be able to get workers sometimes when you place certain kinds of buildings, and workers will allow you to expand the range of the die pips when you play them. So if I play a 4 and I spend a worker, that 4 could be used as a 3, 4, or 5. Sometimes there's ways to increase the strength of a worker to, let's say, a +2. So now if I play a 4, I can spend that 4 die as anything between a 2 and a 6. There's just a lot of variability in the game, and a lot of the tiles that you place on your player board give you endgame scoring conditions, and other tiles give you sort of ongoing powers. So there's also a good amount of engine building in this game, and you'll find that if you play it at a high level, what you can do with those 2 dice, because you can use those dice to sell goods, get workers, expand the range of those dice, get silverlings, buy additional tiles in the middle of the board, buy tiles that give you additional actions. Sometimes you can expand your round into a significant number of actions, more than 2 being the number of dice that you have. So it is a really, really good engine building game and tile placement game. And I like this game, and I'd gone ahead because when the original version came out, it was very ugly. It looks like a 10, 20-year-old game. They did a revised version, an updated version, a couple of years ago, and I had thought I was going to get rid of my first edition to get the new edition. I wanted a nicer, shinier version. But the new edition that they did, the colors that they used, and the graphic design that they used in it, to me, made it an eyesore, made it hard to look at. It was almost headache-inducing, I thought, the design layout on the colors, the oranges and the browns, and just the disparate graphic design. So I decided not to get that version, but I still was sitting there with my, kind of ugly first edition. So Awakened Realms, which is the company that did this War of Mine and the Nemesis games, Etherfields, Tainted Grail, they do a lot of big, very highly produced games with miniatures. I think they did ISS Vanguard, which has all these cards, these binders of cards. They just produce games for hundreds of dollars on Kickstarter that are extremely well produced. So they did a new version of Castles of Burgundy fairly recently, and it makes all of these tiles, they're basically miniatures versions of these tiles, much like you'd see in a very high-end version of Terraforming Mars. And it's sort of above and beyond what anyone would need to play Castles of Burgundy. You can get the original base game probably fairly cheaply now, and that game will give you all of the gameplay experience that you need. You'll do it on the cheap. You'll be able to have a fantastic experience with it because the gameplay is that good and that diverse. But for those of us who want something more, who want it to look prettier, here was this option, and it was a fairly expensive option, and I went ahead and backed it. But then I hadn't played the game in a couple of years, and so I figured, let me play this again on Board Game Arena and see if I'm going to regret my purchase or not. And what I found is that no, I'm not. In fact, it made me feel justified in spending the extra cheddar to get this very expensive version of Castles of Burgundy because the game is so good and such an evergreen. And again, I want to stress that you don't need that really expensive version. You can get the cheaper version and have an amazing time with it. And I think it's going to be a game that you want to keep in your collection forever, depending on, what kind of games you like. But if you like tile placement, you like engine building, you like some good strategy involved, this game is so good. And me knowing that and knowing that it's a game I'll likely have in my collection forever, I feel more justified in having this nicer version because I know that for decades to come, it's going to get play and it's going to be pretty when we play it. And so I do feel more justified in that purchase now. And it also just was a reminder how good the game is. So for me, Castles of Burgundy is coming in with a 9.0. I would recommend if there's a way to get the new version through the Pledge Manager and you want a really nice, expensive version, go ahead and do that. But if you just want a really good game, go out and get the first version. There's no reason not to get that. And you can probably get that very cheaply right now. And when the new version comes out, when it finally delivers in the next year or something, you'll probably see even more people selling off their older versions and you'll be able to pick those up on the cheap. So keep your eyes out for this one. It's also something that you can play on Board Game Arena, and it's just a great game I would recommend to anyone. There are a few little fiddly rules the more you get into it, like the rules with the workers, the rules with the silverlings. So when you sit down and learn it, there may be a few extra little fiddly rules that you'll need to learn beyond just roll 2 dice, then use those dice to draft things. So it's not quite as simple as just that. But it does start from just that, and then there's just kind of a few rules addenda on top of it. So it's not hard to learn, it's not hard to teach, and it has lots of good choices, and I think it's a game that heavier gamers still like, because there are so many kind of good ways to play at a high level, but lighter gamers can come into it and not be overwhelmed. So again, 9.0 for the Castles of Burgundy. I'm talking about Kingdom Builder for the first time in this video, and this is a game that I've always been curious about. It's published by Queen Games, and I knew that turns basically consisted of drawing a card and then putting out 3 of your houses on that terrain type. And that's it. There's a little more to it than that, because you're trying to connect certain buildings and certain castles. Connecting to castles will score you 3 points. Connecting to buildings will give you powers that you can execute on your turn. And the only sort of rule with that is you need to execute those powers either before or after you place out your 3 buildings on a certain region type for that round. So you can't execute those powers in the middle of that 3 building placement, but you can do it either before or after. And it's modular in the sense that there's 4 pieces, and so you're going to be drawing some tiles, putting them together to create a 4-piece board, and then you're going to use some random goal cards that score different ways, and that's it. And then you're just going to place buildings out. And I know there's a lot of expansions, as Queen Games often does. There are some offshoots as well. There's like a winter version. So there's a lot of variability baked into this with things that you can add onto the game, both in terms of just the goal cards that you can choose from and all of the expansions. So I knew it was a very simple game, but I knew it had a good amount of variability built into it, and I wanted to experience the game. It was just one of those, it feels like building blocks of board games that everyone should play and everyone should be aware of, that I skipped over and never gotten to play. So I played it recently on Board Game Arena. I played 1 game with a friend of mine. I'm now in the middle of a 2nd game with a bunch of random people on Board Game Arena, and I'm enjoying it. And I think for what it is, for how simple it is to pick up, play, and teach, it's really good. It's surprisingly good. It has a surprising amount of strategy to it. And it's just something that you can almost pick up and play. Really, really easy. Now, all of that said, I think because the general rules are so simple and so similar, that it is a game that, even though there's variability within it and how it works, if you play this a lot over time, it's going to get very samey. Even with different scoring rules, there are going to be variations on the same thing, so it could get very samey. But I also think that it operates in a very specific, very good place, corner of gaming, where it offers good choices, and it's something that you can just pick up and teach, and people can pick up and play pretty much on the fly. So it's a game that I'm going to come back to occasionally and just kind of keep checking in with and see what kind of strategy I can find with it, how that strategy builds. But it's a game that I think also it's just going to be samey enough that I'm not going to play it a ton. So I don't think I'm ever going to feel the need to buy this one. I think if you did really love it, there's a lot you could buy and a lot you can add on, so you could have a huge Kingdom Builder collection. And I love it when games are like that. I like to have huge versions of games with lots of expansions so that you can just play it endlessly. And if this is a game that you really like, I think the ability is there to do that with this game and just have a lot of stuff for it. So that's wonderful. But I think I'll be able to get my fill of this on Board Game Arena, and I don't think it'll be a game that I need to have in my collection or have in volume to keep playing. So I'm going to give this one a 6.5 for now, and occasionally I will check back in with it and adjust my score depending on how I feel, it plays and play evolves as I evolve with it, and the limitations to strategy I find, or the extra abilities to create more strategy I find. Now, Lost Ruins of Arnak is a game I've talked about at length quite a bit lately, so I won't go into really any detail with it here. Just know that I love the game. I've talked about it a lot. You can go back into previous videos if you want to hear more about it, but I am continuing my rating of Lost Ruins of Arnak at a 9.0. Patchwork is a game I think I actually meant to talk about this game last video, and I've now played it 6 times recently. I do have a physical copy of it. I've played that a bunch in the past. I really like Patchwork, and playing it online recently as I have been has sort of renewed my interest in it. It's a tile placement game that has to do with creating a patchwork quilt. This is something where they've created so many damn versions for it. There's like one for almost every holiday. So there's a Christmas version, a 4th of July version, a Halloween version. I don't know if the shapes of the tiles and the buttons on those tiles vary at all from version to version. I think maybe not, because you'd have to rebalance the game for all of those kinds of tile tweaks, but I'm not 100% sure of that. I think if the tile shapes and sizes and the amount of buttons on the tiles are different for every version, that would incentivize players to buy more than one version. And here's why. Because while I love the game, and I think there's a good amount of strategy in it, and I'm actually naturally very good at it. I do well at it most of the time. And I really like that central puzzle of placing these tiles on the board, trying to fill it out. Your player marker is going around the score tracker, and every once in a while, you'll pass a button mark on that, and you'll get some button income. And your button income will be based on the tiles that you've placed previously and the button icons on those tiles. What this means is that early on in the game, you really want to get tiles with buttons on them. You want to increase your button income. And if you do that, you'll have a lot of button income by the end of the game. You'll have a lot more ability to choose between the different tiles to place, because some of those tiles will cost a lot of buttons. And late in the game, when all the lower button costing tiles have come and gone, you'll want the ability to still make some choices, because your board will get more and more filled out. And so you'll want to be able to choose tiles that fit in with the spaces that you have left. So you do want to get those tiles with buttons on them early on. And then later in the game, you'll be able to kind of make more choices based on the time on the tiles, because every time you place a tile, you're going to be spending buttons on them, but you'll also be spending time. And as you spend time, your marker will advance, and whoever is kind of last on the track will get to keep playing. So if someone is very far ahead of you, you may be able to take several turns before your marker catches back up with them. But if you get to a point where you don't have enough buttons and you haven't passed a button income spot, then you won't be able to take a tile, and you will have to just advance to the other player's marker. And that can be bad if you're really far behind them, if you don't have any buttons, because you're losing time. So there's a really good puzzle in how all of those things come together. Needing buttons, how you manage your time, and then also when certain players are the first one to pass other markers, they'll get these little 1 square tiles that they can use to fill in empty holes on their board. Those can be very valuable, especially because there is a 7-point tile that will be awarded to the first player who completes a big grid on their board of 7 by 7, an area of 7 by 7, squares that's completely filled in. So you don't want to leave gaps, and if you do, you want to grab some of these little 1 square tiles to fill in those gaps. And oftentimes, whoever gets that 7-point tile, that's going to be the thing that decides the winner, because scoring can be that tight. It's also a game that has a lot of negative scoring. At the end of the game, every square on your board that has not been covered will score you a -2 points. And then you'll score positive points for all the buttons that you have still in your inventory. And as you cross that finish line, you'll get one last button income. So if you have some buttons left over and then a high amount of button income, you'll end the game with a lot of buttons, and they will do more than just offset the negative points. But you need to be building up that button income to do that. It's not at all uncommon to get to a point where someone doesn't have that much button income and they have a lot of empty spaces on the board at the end, so they end up with a negative score. So I really like the game. I think there's a lot of strategy involved in it. I like the tile placement puzzle. I wouldn't put it quite up on the same level as some of the 2-player games that I've been talking about lately that are kind of on my short list of 2-player games. That includes the new Wingspan Duet mode in Wingspan Asia, Caper Europe, Curious Cargo, and I think below those games are Seven Wonders Duel, and then I'd probably put Patchwork maybe on the same level as Seven Wonders Duel. Now, the thing for me that's really keeping Patchwork from rising up a little bit higher, because I do really love Patchwork, I'd like to score it a little higher than I am, is the fact that the tiles that you're selecting are the same every game, right? I mean, there's a good amount of tiles, but you're going to be seeing the same tiles every game. So the more that you play this, the more you're going to be like, oh yeah, okay, I'm choosing between these three tiles right now, and I'm very familiar with these three tiles. So even though the game is going to feel a little bit different from play to play because of the order of the tiles, the person that you're playing with, the choices that you have to make early on based on the small amount of buttons that you have and trying to get button income, over time the puzzle starts to feel a little bit similar because you're using the same tiles. And this is why I said if the other versions have not just a skin on them, but they actually have different kinds of tiles, different shapes, different amounts of button income, I think that would change up the variability so that it would make sense to get a few different versions of Patchwork. And then if you start to get a little overly familiar with the tiles in one version, you could switch it out for another version. But I haven't looked deeply enough into it to know if they're just pure kind of cosmetic reskins or if they have different tiles. Now, if they did have different tiles, they'd need to rebalance the game every time, do a significant amount of playtesting to make sure that it still plays well, and so that players can't paint themselves into corners too much. There is an element of that where you can get to a point where, and I mentioned this already, where you don't have a tile that you can buy because you don't have enough buttons, and so you have to advance, and that's just brutal. And that can happen, but there's ways that you can prevent and safeguard against it a little bit, especially if you know the game. There's also ways that you can see what's coming and do things to really kind of screw over your opponent and put them in a situation where they don't have a choice. But the game needs to have some balance to it so that it's not just overwhelmingly like that, with players consistently being blocked and just having to both advance over and over. So there is some playtesting I think that would have to happen. And I think what I'll do is the next time that I talk about this in the future, because I'm sure I'll be playing it more, I'll look into this and I'll see what the different versions are like and if they do have different tiles, and I'll let you all know, because I think if there are versions with different tiles, it would certainly merit buying a few different versions of the game. And the game is cheap. It's a smaller box game. I'm assuming you can get it for like $20, maybe 30, maybe even under 20 on a sale. So it's a good enough game, I think. If the versions are different and you really like it, it would merit getting a few different versions. But next time I talk about it, I'll let you all know if the versions indeed are different or if they're just reskins with different art on them. Now, that issue, though, is going to keep Patchwork, for me, in an 8.0. So I think if there was a little more variability in the tiles, I could see it going up to a 9.0. But I'm going to keep it at an 8.0, which for me right now keeps it on a level with Seven Wonders Duel, but not as good a two-player game as Wingspan Duet, Curious Cargo, or Caper Europe. And again, in the future, I'll update and let people know if the various versions are different. The last game that I'm talking about that I've played is more Wingspan, and this is kind of like Lost Ruins of Arnak, where I've just been playing a lot lately. I've been talking about it at length, so if you'd like to hear more about it, you can go back to previous videos. But my feelings about Wingspan remain the same, and my score remains the same, so Wingspan is getting an 8.5 from me. Summing up the scores for this week, we've got Seven Wonders coming in with a 6.5, the Castles of Burgundy with a 9.0, Kingdom Builder with a 6.5, Lost Ruins of Arnak with a 9.0, Patchwork with an 8.0, and Wingspan with an 8.5. I've got 3 different campaigns to highlight this week. These are the games that I consider to be the best things out there on crowdfunding, the cream of the crop. I'm finding that as we're getting late into the year here, there are much fewer games coming out. So I anticipate that this section will be smaller, at least until we head into like January, until the next group of really, big games start coming back out. There's still some good choices to be made. There's a lot of smaller games too, a lot of cheaper games. So there's some good choices for you if you're wanting to get something smaller and not spend a lot of money. And I think all 3 games that I'm going to be talking about this week, well, at least 2 of them, are smaller productions with a smaller price tag. And I'm also seeing that for these campaigns, there aren't a lot of add-ons. There aren't a lot of pledge levels. So you're seeing, 1, 2, 3 pledge levels at most, and not much in the way of add-ons. So they're kind of simple campaigns. Now, in addition to the fact that I bookmark my videos, so you can kind of just jump to the section that you like or look at the game that you like, I also have links to the crowdfunding campaigns. So if I'm talking about a certain campaign here and you like what you hear and you think it's something you want to learn more about or maybe go back, you can just go into the description section and click on the link and it will take you right to that game, wherever that game is, whether it's on BackerKit, GameFound, or Kickstarter. I believe for this video, for all 3 of these, they're all on Kickstarter. But either way, just click on the link. It'll take you right there. You can back the game immediately if you are so enticed, or you can learn more about it on the page and then back it if it's something that you think is for you. The first of these is called Empire's End. It had a minimum required funding goal of $25,000. They're currently at $101,000 as I shoot this, which is about 4 times that minimum required funding goal. Empire's End is going to complete its funding on Thursday, December the 15th. It's a game for 2 to 4 players that plays in about 45 to 60 minutes. Complexity on the game is medium light, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at medium high. Now, this is a civilization building game, but it is largely constructed around the central mechanic of auction and bidding. So you're going to be creating a civilization with a lot of card play, and a lot of that card acquisition is going to be done through auction and bidding. It's designed by John D. Clare, who's best known for Cubidos, Dead Reckoning, Eco's First Continent, Mystic Vale, and Space Base. And it's got art from Kwanchai Maria, who's worked on Cryptid, Dinosaur Island, In the Hall of the Mountain King, Sidereal Confluence, and Under Falling Skies. And it's being published by Brotherwise Games, who have put out Call to Adventure, Overboss, A Boss Monster Adventure, and Unearth. There are 3 different pledge levels for this. For $35, you can pledge the game. For $40, you can pledge the Deluxe Edition, and that is going to add in screen-printed wooden markers, wooden player markers. For $55, you can pledge the Deluxe Edition with wooden tokens, and that is going to add in screen-printed wooden resources. So you'll still be getting the wooden player markers, but now you'll also be getting screen-printed wooden resources. Shipping in the continental US has been estimated at $5 or $8, so either of the first 2 pledge levels, shipping is $5, and the highest pledge level, shipping is $8. And finally, Brotherwise Games is planning on delivering Empire's End in September of 2023. Next on my list is a game called Shake That City. This one had a minimum required funding goal of $10,000. They're currently at $48,000, which is almost 5 times that minimum required funding goal. They are currently the highest multiplier of this week, meaning they've done the most business on top of that minimum required funding goal. They're actually coming in at about 4.8. Not quite 5, 4.8 times that minimum required funding goal. The final game that I'll be talking about in a couple of minutes is at a 4.7, so just a little bit less than Shake That City. Shake That City is also going to complete its funding on Thursday, December the 15th. This is a game for 1 to 4 players. It plays in about 20 to 40 minutes. Complexity on the game is light, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at low. Now, this game is a puzzly game involving city building and pattern building. The primary mechanic here, though, is tile placement. It's co-designed by Mads Flo, who's previously worked on a game called Kapai and Kor Turndal Kier. It has art from Olga Kim, and it's being published by Alderac Entertainment Group, who are probably best known for Calico, Cascadia, Istanbul, Space Base, and War Chest. Now, there's only 1 pledge for this one. It's just $29. It's called Shake That City Kickstarter Edition, but it will come with some things that I don't think will be included later with the retail versions of the game. Enough things, I think, significantly that if you really do like this game, you probably want to get this version, but let's talk about what those additions are. First of all, you're going to be getting the Wild Knights micro expansion, so it's a little additional micro expansion that's going to be coming with the game. There are a few social goals that they're trying to hit. 2 of them have already been achieved. One that will put some stickers into your game. I'm not sure if those stickers are actually used on components or they're just kind of superficial stickers. You'll also be getting, this is another social goal, kind of a tile trays. So those are functional within the game, right? These tile trays. And then there are a bunch of regular stretch goals that have already been hit that will increase the quality of the game itself. So you're going to get another variant with the game called the construction variant. You're going to get a solo variant, a family variant. The box itself will be thicker. The tiles inside will be thicker. There is a linen finish on the tiles, on the box, and on the player boards. The scoreboard pad will be double-sided. There's UV spot on the box, and it's coming with an upgraded round tracker. So all of those things I do not think will be present in the retail version. And certainly things like the thicker box, that's going to help just keep, the game in better condition over time, having a thicker box. But things like thicker tiles and the linen finish on everything, that's the sort of thing that makes the game look nicer and also may help it kind of stand the test of time a little bit longer, help it physically last longer. So if this is a game that you think you're really going to like, you may want to consider getting the Kickstarter version instead of waiting for it to hit retail. And it's not huge. I don't know how much it's going to be when it goes to retail, but it's not a hugely expensive game, right? The pledge is $29, and in the continental US, shipping has been estimated at $15. So your final total is going to come to $44. Now, it's something that, I don't know, at retail, maybe you'll be able to find $30 or less, especially on a sale, maybe around $20. Can't say. But it will be a lesser version, and it won't look as nice. It may not last as long if the production behind it isn't as of the same quality. Finally, AEG is planning on delivering Shake That City in March of 2023. Our third and final campaign of the week is for a game called Pest. This one had a minimum required funding goal of $31,000. They're currently at $146,000, which is almost 5 times a multiplier. It's about 4.7, so it's slightly less than Shake That City. However, this is the game that is doing the most overall business just in terms of dollars for this period. That's not a huge surprise because it's a more expensive game. It had a bigger minimum required funding goal, whereas Shake That City and Empire's End, I think, are cheaper games to produce, and they had smaller minimum required funding goals. So it's not surprising that, they haven't gotten to quite the same dollar amount. But Pest is the highest grossing game of the period, end of the day. It's going to complete its funding on Saturday, December the 17th. It plays 1 to 5 players in about 60 to 150 minutes, so that's 1 to 2.5 hours. Complexity on the game is medium heavy, and we're going to set the risk associated with the campaign at medium high. Now, in a nutshell, this is a worker placement Euro game that's themed around the plague. It's co-designed by Thomas Nielsen and Kai Stark, who previously worked together on a game called Vegin. It's got art from Daniel Kuna and Sarah Stanoska. She previously worked on a game called Magna Roma. And it's produced by Arcona Games, who have previously put out Small Railroad Empires, Small Samurai Empires, and Small Star Empires. Now, there are only 2 pledge levels on this one, no add-ons. For $82, you can pledge at the Pest level. That will get you the game itself and the Capital City miniature pack. What this looks like, it's this big round piece that you'll put in the middle of the board. If you know the game Viscounts of the West Kingdom, it kind of looks like that, this big plastic piece that'll go right in the middle of the board. And then there are 5 different little buildings that you can attach to it. I believe those buildings get attached through gameplay, as well as 5 of these little flag scoring token things. They'll also get placed on that board. So it's kind of this centerpiece thing, and it is included at this lowest pledge level. If you pledge at the $100 level, which is called Deluxe, you're going to have 2 more things added into your pledge, an event card pack and the Deluxe upgrade pack. And the Deluxe upgrade pack is going to include wooden tokens and dual layered player boards. I particularly love dual layered player boards in my game. It's great to have things, fit in snugly and be secure on your player board, so if someone bumps the table, everything doesn't go flying. We've probably all played games where you're just putting cubes on a little mat And if someone hits that, I think this was a problem actually that really afflicted Terraforming Mars early on, because there are so much cube placements on maps, and if you hit the table with that, everyone's cubes go flying, and you never know quite how to put them back. So with Terraforming Mars, I think that became a huge problem early on in that game's life, where people wanted dual layer player boards. They were getting them off Etsy. Eventually, they did a campaign where they put out their own dual layer player boards, but they were really required for Terraforming Mars, just with so many cubes on player mats. On other games, it's not always as essential, but it's always nice to have. Now, in the continental US, your estimated shipping is $20 for either version that you pledge, and Arcona Games is looking to deliver this one in May of 2024, so that is a ways out. That's a year and a half out. It's not going to be coming to you, in 6 months in May 2023. No, this one will be delivering in a year and a half. Only one thing to talk about in this pledge section this week. I did consider backing Maple Valley. I do like Kids Table board games, Kids Table BG. I love their stuff. I own their game Fossilis, which is back here somewhere, right there. That's an amazing game, I think, which is put out by this kind of kids table board games imprint. But this is a great game for even heavy gamers, I think. I think there's so many good choices in Fossilis. It's just a wonderful, wonderful game. And so, Maple Valley was something that I considered a little bit. I know a lot of people love Creature Comforts, which it's sort of a spiritual successor to that, shares a lot in common with that. I still haven't played Creature Comforts, and both of those games are games I'd really like to play at some point. However, my collection is getting much, much larger, and I don't want to be acquiring, things that are games that are not going to be hitting the table a lot. And I think ultimately Maple Valley is just a little bit light for my taste, or a lot light for my taste, even though it's very well made and seems very fun and compelling for what it is. So there were definitely good reasons to back Maple Valley, and I think for a lot of people that is a really good game to get and to back. I passed on that one. The one game that I did actually end up backing was Fit to Print, and this one is a real-time tile placement game. I'm a little wary about that because I don't love real-time games. That was a game that made me sell off my copy of Sorcerer City, which is a real-time tile placement game. I liked some aspects of Sorcerer City, but the real-time element just ruined it for me. And I think there's a way to even play it without the real-time element, but it's baked into the design, and I don't want to play it with some variant, so it's just better for me to get it out of my collection and play other things. I do really like Ian O'Toole's art. That's one of the things that pushed me over the top into backing this one, and it is from the publisher who most recently did Calico, Cascadia, and Verdant, and all three of those games are great. So I took a little bit of a risk with Fit to Print, and if it comes and I play it, and the real-time element bothers me, I'll either sell it off or do a giveaway for it. And that's something that I'm looking to do in the future as I get back into doing teach and review videos in the next year, streaming games live on Twitch, and doing some other things like, top 10 lists, top 20, top 30 lists, things like that. I will also likely be giving away a certain amount of games through my Patreon once that launches. So anything that I think is a good game that people may like that's just maybe not for me, I'll be passing along to you all through giveaways and things like that. So that'll be something to watch for once I eventually launch my Patreon. I've got 9 games to talk about in the new arrival section this week. Some of these I actually forgot about, like they've come in over the last couple weeks. One of those was the Clinic Deluxe Biohazard and COVID expansion. This was from the most recent and final crowdfunding campaign that they did. They recently did the deluxe edition of the game. They did a bunch of extensions. There's now 5 of them. There are all these different expansions with more things you can throw into the game. They did a booklet that gives you kind of campaigns that you can run and different versions of things that you can, put all the stuff into the game in different combinations. And then during the pandemic, Alban VR did a COVID-19 little mini expansion. It was something at the time, I think he did it as a fundraiser. I think he donated some of the money from it. But it was something at the time, I just didn't want to gamify that. So I didn't really want that expansion. But then later on, they did this Biohazard, another smaller expansion. So I did pledge for that. And I went ahead and I said, okay, I'm just going to pick up the COVID expansion with that. So I got these 2 smaller expansions. When it came, it didn't actually deliver to my door because it's a smaller expansion. So when it went into my mailbox, I think it came in over Thanksgiving when I wasn't around. So my mailbox got overstuffed. It went back to the post office, and then I had to go over there and pick it up. So this, I believe, was actually shipped to me during kind of Thanksgiving. But I'm finally being aware of it now and kind of recording it as an arrival. And in general, I really like Clinic Deluxe a lot. It's a worker placement game, it's a tile placement game, and with all of the content that Alban Viard's put out for it, there's just so much variability. There are multiple campaigns that you can play if you want to play it, as a campaign. I'm not sure if you can do the campaign just in solo mode or with multiple people, but either way, I love campaign-y type stuff, so that's something that I hope to do eventually. I wouldn't put it on quite the level of like Vital Lacerda game. It has Ian O'Toole art, which begs that comparison a little bit. It's more sandboxy than that, but I like it. And as I said, there is so much content right now for it that it's just ridiculous, and it's a game that I hope to play a lot of as time goes on. I also finally got Crescent Moon in. This is a game that's been really highly talked about as one of the better games of 2022. It uses area control, area majority, and very significantly different variable player powers. And I don't know much beyond it than that. The board is modular. It looks a little bit like Five Tribes, just in terms of tiles and sort of the color scheme of the tiles and some of the components that get placed out on them. But it doesn't, I don't think, have like a Mancala mechanic. It's more working off of these wildly different variable player powers. Now, this was something that I ordered much earlier in the year, and I ordered it at the same time as a pre-order of something, I don't remember what, that got very delayed. So I'm just finally getting Crescent Moon now. I don't even know if the thing that was delayed is something that's in this batch of games, because 2 orders that I ordered through, I think it was Cool Stuff Inc., were tied to pre-orders that took so long to come in, and there are some items now in both of those kind of orders that they don't have in stock that are located elsewhere. So I actually talked to Cool Stuff Inc., and they were very cool about it. They removed those items from my order, and I just went ahead and ordered those 4 games from Card House, and they are now on their way to me, as well as all of the other items that were in the 2 packages from Cool Stuff. So I'm getting all of those games. It's like a dozen games. They're finally shipping to me right now, but they're all coming in at different times, and I don't remember which things were holding up the order. Not that it matters, but Crescent Moon, new to the collection, something that is supposed to be one of the best games of 2022, and something that people I think may want to hear more about. Let me know in the comments if this is a game you would like teach and review made for. But because I'm getting it so much late, because it was tied to these other pre-orders, it may be a game that people aren't as curious about as if I had gotten it when I ordered it back in like May. At the same time, it's a game that I think has also kind of slid under the radar. So it may not be a game that people are as aware of, but I'm thinking that they'll become more aware of it as people are putting together their best of 2022 lists, because I think it's going to get a lot of mentions, and it may be, back on everyone's radar. So if you want to know more about that game, if you want to have a teach and review made for it, let me know in the comments below. And that is true of any of these games that I'm talking about. Also, Fit to Print, the game that I backed this period. If that's something that you're going to want to hear more about when I get it, maybe before it comes to retail, let me know, and that's something I can kind of put on the queue list for production for a teach and review, and then I'll get to that when that game eventually comes in. But for anything on this list that I'm talking about right now, if there's a game on this list that you're not seeing out there too much and you want me to do a teach and review for it with the upgraded equipment I'm getting, let me know, and it's something that I can put at the top of the queue. I also got in the Crusaders Divine Influence expansion. This is an expansion for a game called Crusaders Thy Will Be Done from Seth Jaffe. I have heard nothing but good things about Crusaders. I still have not gotten into the table, and this expansion, I'm not sure. It might have been something that was in my cart that got delayed, or it might have been one of the things that caused the delay, meaning that it's just shipping out now. So this expansion may be an expansion that is not been talked about too much and doesn't have videos out there on it. So if this is something that you're not really seeing, let me know. I can put it on my list and get this played along with the base game, and then try to get a teach and review done for those two, the game and the expansion, sooner rather than later. But that is new to my collection. It's something I'm very much looking forward to playing, but I'm also very much looking forward to playing the base game, and I need to get that done first. I also got Florence in. This is the new game from Braincrack Games. It's the third game in a trilogy that started with a game called Ragusa, and the second game was Venice. All the games are made by different designers, so they're not really similar in too many ways, other than they're themed around different cities. Ragusa, Venice, and now Florence. Florence to me looked really cool because there are 3 different giant meeples that kind of wander around this rondel in the central part of the board. And depending on where you take workers and actions and where these various roaming giant meeple characters are, you're going to have bonus abilities. I just really liked the design of this game when it was on crowdfunding, and I liked the way some of the mechanics worked, so I went ahead and backed it. I also got an expansion that was available through that campaign for Venice. Venice is a game that I like a lot. It's by David Turksey. So those things are now here. They've arrived. I need to play some more Venice, play it with the expansion, and also check out Florence. And I'm jazzed about Florence. I have fairly high expectations for it. So once I get that played, I'll let you know what I think about it. I also got in Fog of Love, and this is an older game. Probably a lot of people have played this one at this point, but you're doing a little bit of role playing in this game. You're taking on different characters, and you're playing it with another player, and you're doing things based on following the dynamic of a relationship. And I do know that when you play this game, you're not supposed to play it for yourself. You're supposed to literally play it for the character that you have for that game. It's a game that my wife Kristen was really interested in, so it's something that I finally went ahead and ordered. Again, this was one that I think I put in my cart back in May. It's finally shipped out, so I will be getting to it soon enough and letting you all know what I think about it. I also got in Frostpunk, and this is something, the first package came in a week ago. The second package was delayed in Germany for a while. I finally got it in. It is a massive box to hold the whole thing. It's a big Euro game set in the tundra. It looks fantastic. Lots of things going on with different factions, multiple mechanics. I'm really excited for this one. I believe there is a video game version. This is the board game version now. Just a massive Euro game with huge miniatures, lots of expansion content, lots of additional crowdfunding content. I'm really excited to get this one to the table. It may take me a little while though. I have several kind of big games like this that I think require multiple players to get to the table, so it's got to get in line to some degree, but let me know if this is something you want teach and review content made for, and if so, I can push it up to the front of that production line. I also got in Last Aurora Frozen Steel, which is interesting because the original base game and its first expansion were done through crowdfunding, but now they've gone ahead and issued the smaller expansion just through retail. And I think it's something that, if people crowdfunded it, they may be waiting or, looking for it to come back on crowdfunding for an expansion, but that's not happening. This expansion just went right to retail. It's a smaller expansion, so it's kind of a little box. It's got some content in it that adds in a narrative element, so you can kind of play a narrative campaign with it. It's got a new faction. It's got some new enemies. That was a smaller problem in the base game. There just weren't enough enemy types, and when you play the game, you kind of throw in a certain kind of enemy. I think there were 2, maybe 3 groups of enemy types, so not a lot of variability, and I really like the game, so having a new group of enemy types is really welcome to give the game more variability, and then just more of a whole bunch of different kinds of cards in the game to add more variability. So as much as I like the original game, this is something I think will breathe a lot more life into it and is really welcome and almost needed in this case. But if you're someone that acquired Last Aurora originally through crowdfunding, just know that this game is now out there, and it's out there through retail. So you may want to go look for it there and pick it up that way. I also got in Lockup, a role player tale. And this is a game that I actually had a friend of mine talk about it fairly negatively when it first came out, so I just discredited it and didn't look too closely at it. However, it's designed by Stan Kordonsky. He most recently did Endless Winter Paleo-Americans, and I just got his other game, Resurgence, and I'm really liking everything that he does. So I wanted to circle back around, get this earlier version of his. It's set in the world of Role Player, but it is a worker placement game where players are trying to get out of the jail. I forget the name of the jail, but if you really know Role Player's world, you'll know the name of this jail. It's also featured in Role Player Adventures. So you're trying to escape this jail, and it's a worker placement game, and it's got some mechanics in it that I think look fairly interesting. I've also got the expansion in, but it just came in this morning, so I'll be talking about that next week. But Lockup, Role Player Tale, new to my collection. Very much looking forward to playing it and seeing this earlier game of Stan Kordonsky's. It's not that old. It's just the first in a string of games that he's done recently. This one's from a few years ago. And finally, I got in Stardew Valley, the board game. This was a game that just went straight to retail. It's a farming game. I think people probably know about it if they liked, the video game. It's been out for a while. This is another one that's sat in a cart since back in May. And it's a game that I think my wife, Kristen, will really like. I never really know with her because sometimes there'll be elements in games that she doesn't like. Like a game could be really take that. It could just kind of be very hostile between players. So if it has that, she won't like it. Or it could be a game that has just too many kind of scoring opportunities, too many simultaneous mechanisms. And she usually beats me in games with a lot of mechanisms, but she doesn't really enjoy learning them so much. And definitely games that have, a half a dozen or more ways to score are games that can give her some anxiety because she has ADHD a little bit. So we'll see. We'll see where Stardew Valley falls and all that. I haven't taken a close look enough at the game to know if it's going to sort of trigger her in any of those ways. But I know the farming element to it is something that she really, really likes. And I think it's a game that's really going to appeal to her as long as it doesn't have certain elements in it. So that's a game I'll probably get to the table sooner rather than later just to see if it's a game for her. If it's not a game that she likes, again, it's something I'll be moving out of my collection and probably a game I'll end up doing a giveaway for at some point. Because I think it's a game that if we play it, it's going to be a game I largely play with her. So we'll have to see if she likes it or not. But I would like to find that out sooner rather than later so that if it's a game we won't be keeping around, I can move it out of my collection, free up some space, and if that happens, it may be a game that I do one of the very first giveaways for as soon as I get my Patreon up and running. That wraps this section for the week. That wraps the video. Thank you very much for joining me, spending some time here with me today. Let me know, as I've said before, let me know in the comments if either Fit to Print or any of the games that are new arrivals into my collection are games that specifically interest you and games that you would like to know more about in terms of a teach or a review. Also, just out of curiosity's sake, I'm always interested in hearing if any of the campaigns that we covered are campaigns that you yourself are thinking of backing. I know for me, I think maybe I've been on the fence, but I think I may end up backing one of these three games that I profiled today. And I will reveal which one of the three games I back, if indeed I do back it, in next week's video. Until then, play lots of great games. I hope to do just that. Tomorrow I'll be playing the second to last scenario in my Descent Legends of the Dark campaign. So I'll probably be briefly mentioning that game in next week's video. And then after we finish it, so we'll have one scenario after that. After we finish it, I'll be doing a full review of that game fairly soon once I get all my new equipment in and the studio space set up upstairs. I'll be doing a full review of that video, and I'll be doing it with my friend Ryan, who played through the campaign with me. So you'll be able to hear two different people's opinions on it. But we have had a very mixed experience with that game. And if you've been watching all of my videos, you've heard about that. You can hear about that more in the final review. I'll probably just be glossing over it the next two times I talk about it in the played games section because I don't want to be repeating myself. But I am looking forward to playing it tomorrow And there are a bunch of other games that I hope to get played this week and the coming week, and I will be talking about those next week in the Played Games section. Take care, and I'll see you very, very soon in the next video.